Welcome to this Earth Day special Eureka City Council meeting, Tuesday, April 22nd. We're glad you're all here. We will open this meeting with the land acknowledgement. The land that Eureka rests on is known in the Wiyot language as Jirojiji. Past actions by local, state, and federal governments removed the Wiyot and other indigenous peoples from the land and threatened to destroy their cultural practices. The city of Eureka acknowledged the Wiyot community, their elders both past and present, as well as future generations. This acknowledgement demonstrates the city's commitment to dismantle the ongoing legacies of settler colonialism. And with that, could we get a roll call, please?
Mayor Burgell.
Here.
Councilmember Castellano.
Here.
Councilmember Moulton.
Here.
Councilmember Fernandez.
Here.
Councilmember Bauer.
Here.
Councilmember Contreras Deloach.
Here.
Great. And with that, in a special meeting, we will open this meeting for public comment. Pursuant to the Brown Act, Section 54954.3, the public shall be provided an opportunity to speak only on items that are listed on the special meeting agenda pursuant to City Council Resolution 2011-22. City Council policy is to limit each speaker to 3 minutes. Such time allotment or portion thereof shall not be transferred to other speakers. And just to reiterate, we don't do back and forth. If you have something you'd like to have a conversation about, please email us or give us a call. Is there anyone from the public that would like to comment on this item?
Mayor will take public comment after the report on each item.
Oh, okay. As well as this public comment. Oh, we're
There
not
is
doing
no
public comment now.
Correct.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. So with that, we will turn it over to Mr. Willer for our Capital Improvement Program financing report. Whoop.
Well, good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm very happy to be here tonight to discuss some very important projects. We have decided to break up what is typically, an energizing, enthralling capital improvement program presentation to you all into 2 parts to help provide you with information for the items that's to follow this one. So in my presentation, I'm going to go through 2 sections of our CIP with the hopes of providing you some more detailed information on the projects that Director Millar will be discussing later and the financing of those projects. I will be going through all the projects in each one of these sections, and then coming back at the next meeting, the May 6th meeting, we'll complete the capital improvement program. I believe it'll be the May 6th meeting, the rest of the capital improvement program, in which case we'll go through kind of all the different sections except for the wastewater and land and facilities section. So with that, I will jump in. Again, we'll be covering wastewater and facilities this evening. I'll just give you a brief rundown. When we present the CIP, we're really trying to look at the next 5 years is what our CIP looks at. We try to identify projects that are current needs or near-term needs and what the schedule and financing options are in order to accomplish those projects. The CIP is really here to provide guidelines and a process to go through that is implemented in a very orderly way. So with the schedule and budgets and details of all the projects that go into it. Again, we're talking about 2 of the items tonight, land and facilities and wastewater. The other 5 items we'll be covering at the next meeting. Bam! Jump right into a big old table. I'm not gonna get into the details of this table aside from this is what our wastewater CIP looks like for this current year. And by that I mean we will go through the projects in this table coming up here, but I'm not going to go through the details of each line here. Generally, our tables are broken up with a project name, a page reference to where the individual project description is located, and then looking out the next 5 years, how those dollars are landing throughout that time period. What this is a much more detailed look at what we were just looking at. And the reason why I put this here is because what we've narrowed down here and distilled came from this very large 20-year CIP. And this last year, we had to put together a 20-year CIP that was a requirement of our consent decree. The 20-year CIP, we had to really look at financing long-term projects that are likely to come out of our new permit, including one of the projects we're going to talk about tonight, as well as or a couple projects that we're going to talk about tonight. The reason why we had to go into this great length, 20 years looking ahead, not only was it a requirement of the consent decree, but it made sense to look at how our financing is going to track over the next 20 years. And really with what Director Millar is going to talk about later, you have to look at inflation, look at wastewater enterprise fees. You got to look at how how we're going to pay back these funds, how all those different categories affect the overall budget from year to year, and so that we can try to determine how much how can we fit our projects in over the next year, because we don't have an infinite budget. So you really have to stretch out the budget over a lot of years in order to make it happen. So this is just as a reference. This is what we'll be focusing on tonight, the projects here. But there's a lot of background that goes into making the decisions as to where the projects kind of fall in the time frame.
And when Director Willer is saying consent decree, it's the result of the litigation from the lawsuit.
Thank you. So we have two types of projects in wastewater, two project types that are driven by, one is maintenance and the other is results to changes to our waste discharge permit. I'm going to talk briefly about our maintenance projects, and then we'll jump into a little background before we talk about projects that were that have come out of changes to our waste discharge permit. So our maintenance projects, these are ones we typically see in our in our CIP. These are ones that have to do with, where the treatment plant or the collection system are aging or have a need for whatever reason. Our first bullet point there, the wastewater collection system maintenance, that's our annual sewer main replacement and maintenance project. So that project will be moving ahead this year. Our next project, the Crosstown Interceptor Maintenance, that's a project that we look at to, in this case, maintain the cathodic protection of our pressure sewer main that connects across the city, as well as replace some air release valves on that pressure sewer main. Biosolids dewatering, that's a project to maintain what we have for our centrifuge that dewaters biosolids at the treatment plant. Our current centrifuge has been inoperable for large periods of time over the last year, and we have we produce biosolids at the treatment plant, so we need a way to dispose of those biosolids. And we're at a point now where we need to start looking at getting another centrifuge installed, and so we can keep up with the production rates, so we don't continue to accumulate a backlog of them. We also have our annual sewer lateral replacement project. This is a very spicy category if you're into sewer laterals. I know I am. This one is a project that you're all familiar with, where the city will, we do a project to replace sewer laterals that come in through our fee and lieu program. The last project, the name is difficult to manage because it's been in the CIP for over 10 years now, but this is the final phase of this project. It was associated with our cogeneration replacement down at the wastewater treatment plant. The cogen engines, they're fueled by the gas from our digesters, and that gas is used to also heat the digesters and provide electricity to the treatment plant. We replaced that equipment 2 years ago, but there was a need in order to upgrade our electrical components at the plant, at the head. PG&E said, hey, look, you can install this infrastructure now, but you need to upgrade your service because it's out of compliance with their regulations. So that project is to bring that into compliance. All right, now to the fun stuff. Wastewater history in Eureka. I'm going to run through some background here to help understand a little bit more of the projects that we're going to discuss in the next few slides. So prior to the 1980, the city had 3 treatment facilities. These were more like primary treatment facilities along the bay. There was one located near the Hill Street pump station, so down at the end of Tid Street behind the Open Door Clinic. There was one located at present-day Costco. There was one located at our present-day McCullen's pump station, which is down at the end of Truesdale. So if you think about our city, it's wide, it's flat to a certain degree. And as the collection system gravity flows down, these were the locations where the discharge points were along the bay for all of our sewer for Eureka. In 1974, the Clean Water Act, the Federal Clean Water Act, went into effect. And that caused all the states to have to put into action ways to bring all their treatment plants into compliance with the Clean Water Act. In order to do that, the city of Eureka did regional planning for a regional treatment system and developed for the greater Eureka area. And that's kind of the system that we have right now. We have pump stations at each one of the locations where we've previously had treatment plants. These small treatment plants. We have a crosstown interceptor force main that we pump all of our sewer through from one side all the way to the Elk River treatment plant down at the end of Hilfiger. And of course, that the treatment plant was also a part of the project that came through at that time. At that time, we were also provided with a National Pollution Discharge Elimination System permit, or in California, we refer to them as waste discharge permits. These basically regulate point source pollution, including wastewater treatment plants. Our original permit was in 1984 when the plant was commissioned. So that's when the plant was new. So it's getting up there in age. And at the time, that original permit recognized our outfall as an ocean discharge. That means where we discharge our effluent into the water body. Currently it's Humboldt Bay, but because we discharged on outgoing tide cycles twice a day, and we have millions of gallons of water in the bay that is flushing through the bay on each one of those tide cycles, at the time we were considered an ocean discharge. At the time, we also, like many treatment plants around the state of California and the country, were allowed to bypass secondary treatment during wet weather flows. Wet weather flows for us are anything that's above around 5 million gallons per day. And those are very significant flows. We actually have a treatment capacity of just over 12 million gallons a day. So we are easily be able to take flows up to that. After that, there's bypassing and blending of flows, chlorinate the effluent, and then it's discharged into the bay. Our 2016 permit had some changes to it, and that's where we're getting to these projects. In 2016, we were no longer considered a bay, or no longer considered an ocean discharger. We're now considered a bay discharger. What that means is that we had to comply with we are now under the enclosed bays and estuaries policy for California. That new permit also established eliminating the bypassing of secondary treatment during wet weather flows. So we need to now treat every bit of wastewater that comes down, even up to our highest peak flows of around 32 million gallons per day, which is greatly significant than our dry weather flows, but we have to be able to treat those as well. So we have 3 projects in the CIP that are resulting from changes to those NPDES permit. We have an enclosed bays and estuaries compliance project, an outfall maintenance project, wet weather improvements to eliminating bypassing secondary treatment project. And I'll touch on each one of those. The enclosed bays and estuary policy, or this project, had to meet this policy that was adopted in 1974, right along with the Federal Clean Water Act. it reads this kind of summarized the general terms of the policy. Discharge of municipal wastewaters and industrial process waters to enclosed bays and estuaries other than San Francisco Bay Delta system should only be allowed when a discharge enhances the quality of the receiving water above that which would occur in the absence of the discharge. Very clear, right? It aims to enhance, so our project aims to enhance the beneficial uses of Humboldt Bay, our receiving water. We are currently conducting a feasibility study to develop and analyze alternatives, including options to stay within the bay, as well as looking at an ocean outfall and kind of options in between. We also have our wastewater treatment plant outfall maintenance project. This is a project is both required by our waste discharge requirements and a maintenance project, both at the same time. Project is to replace corroding bolts and parts and pieces that make the outfall structure out in the bay. As you can imagine, it's a very corrosive environment out there. It also has to help protect the standpipe that is out there now with riprap in order to protect it from wave action. And also to replace discharge, and this is the part that's required by our WDRs, which is to replace outfall discharge diffuser ports with high velocity heads. This helps with mixing of our effluent as it's discharged into the bay, which is important for getting a mixing credit, and very, very complex system of reasons why we had to go down that road, which is not very exciting for you, I'm sure. Currently, we are in the planning and design phase with construction moving ahead in 2025 and in 2026. And finally, a project that Director Millar will be kind of presenting on the generals of financing for is the Elk River Wastewater Treatment Plant Wet Weather Improvement Project. We have our permit requirement to cease bypassing of secondary treatment flows by July 1st of 2028. This project is designed to eliminate the bypass by increasing secondary treatment capacity and temporarily storing excess flows until they can be rerouted back through the treatment plant for full treatment, and increases secondary treatment capacity from 12 million gallons a day to 24 million gallons a day. And one of our existing facultated sludge lagoons will be repurposed into an 8 million gallon equalization basin. That'll allow us to store whatever we don't have the capacity to treat and then feed it back to the beginning of the system and get that full treatment that we're required to do. The project has very large pump stations and a lot of piping, a lot of outside of repurposing that FSL, there's a lot of infrastructure going in at the treatment plant for this project. Currently, we're in the bidding process and we've identified a low bidder. Bid award is scheduled to come to the May 6th council meeting, and the project's estimated cost is roughly $20 million. So that wraps up wastewater, and we'll head into land and facilities. As you can see here, a little bit more simple.
Could you pause for questions, maybe?
Sure.
I have some questions.
Okay, Councilmember Moulton, do you have some questions?
Thank you.
welcome.
Yes. First, lovely so far. You don't need to keep apologizing. We're enthralled. It's delightful.
Sure.
No, I mean, this what the city actually does. This is a huge part of it. Bring the clean water in, take the poop away. Like that's enormous. And one of those things that, like, when it's working well, nobody notices. But I had just a question for my own edification. Where does secondary treatment start? Is that before or after the trickling filters?
That's the trickling filters are part of secondary treatment.
So, okay. Can you explain bypass and blending? What are you blending?
Yeah, so bypassing really is we primary treat the effluent that comes in. We get raw effluent that comes in, say through like crosstown interceptor, which we talked about earlier. It gets screened through a bar screen. Mm-hmm. It goes through a primary clarifier, removes a lot of the grit and the heavy items. It does some settling through that system, separates out a lot of the biosolids get separated out at that point. And then after that, that's when it would go to the secondary treatment system generally. During high flows, so when we get outside of our treatment capacity that we currently have around 12 million gallons, then any flows excess of that would get rerouted and blended with the 12 million gallons that we would fully treat, and it would get blended and then would get chlorinated and then discharged on our outgoing tide cycle. There's also storage at the end in our chlorination basin, so we would store a lot of it there after it's been chlorinated before it was discharged to line up with those windows.
Okay, that makes sense to me. Thank you. Well, my other stuff can wait. Thanks.
Councilmember Castellano?
Thank you. Let's see. I was just curious. Are prices adjusted, costs adjusted for inflation in terms of, going forward in the next 10 years? Is that included or?
Yeah, certainly. We definitely account for inflation each and every year. It's something that, it fluctuates, but it also stays the same. It's definitely there. It's a thing. But we try to account for it the best we can. So, yes.
Perfect. Thank you. And then let's see. When will this feasibility study be completed for the ocean outfall?
So we have, I believe our deadline is October of 2026 to have that completed.
Thank you. And I was curious if any of these plans make, I know some of them kind of were up against a wire and we need to do them, but do any of them make sense to kind of wait and see what the feasibility study tells us, or?
With regards to the
wastewater treatment outfall planning?
The outfall, because of that mixing portion that I mentioned with the jets, that's why it's part of our waste discharge requirements. They want us to do that no matter what we do, especially since there's there could be a significant time, say if for whatever reason we weren't able to stay in the bay and we had to find some other place to discharge.
Great. So basically, just to make sure I understand, the work we're doing or preparing to do around outfall would be useful even if we have to, even if we find out we have to move to ocean outfall, basically.
Correct.
Great. And then last meeting, when Eric was presenting for HWMA, there was talk of the digester, the compost study that's happening, and perhaps one day there will be a digester, we don't know. Will that play any role in how we might perceive future planning?
If we were able to have a local location that we could take our biosolids to, we have Class B biosolids, and in order to transition them to a lesser degree biosolids that could be land applied more easily or dealt with in a number of different ways versus how we're regulated currently as a Class B, it would be that would be a huge thing financially. We pay a company to haul off our biosolids and dispose of them far out of the area, Central Valley or north to the Bay Area. So it's a huge undertaking because there's no place to take those currently.
And while they continue, the amount of volume that we would have would be difficult. I mean, it'll help supplement, so the more options that we have, the better. But the permitting that they're going to get and the mixing with green waste in order to do that, in order to make the compost, it will help, but there's no way that all of the biosolids that we get when we do that will be able to be accommodated by HWMA, but it'll help supplement.
Okay, super. Thank you.
Do we have any further questions? Councilmember Bauer?
I just had a question about, we've been doing a lot of lateral work and sewer main replacement. Has it changed the infiltration at all? Are we able to notice that,
It's a good question. The short answer is I don't know. The longer answer is we've just completed our third pump station. We talked about those 3 pump stations. We just completed upgrades each one of those pump stations, and each one of those got a new flow flow meter. Thank you. Yes, I know. Really? Flow meter. Yeah, so we got a new flow meter. So we'll be able to much more actually get a little bit more at the details of where each one of those basins that flow into those pump stations with kind of volume of flow we're getting down there. Before that, we didn't have that level of granularity. We were looking at like pump run times, and that's just not a real accurate way to do it. I would say I wouldn't expect to see a whole lot yet. I don't think we've really hit that level of like, hey, we've done enough mains and enough laterals to see a substantial impact. It's going to be difficult to kind of pick. In addition to that, it's really challenging to try to compare previous to now based on when you look at each one of these events. Or a wet weather event, they're a storm event. So each storm event's a little different. You get like one that comes in really intense and then it tapers off, for a long time, or one that has a more, it's a longer duration, more steady. You have to kind of match up your storm events with your flows before and after. I mean, we will work to do that, but it's not an exact science, I guess. It's challenging from that standpoint in order to really get a good feel for how the impacts to improvements that we're doing with mains and laterals would have at like flows hitting the pump stations or down at the treatment plant.
Anything further? So we will open this item up to public comment. Is there?
There's some more.
Oh, I thought you said each item. I'm sorry. So to be clear.
Yep, I can finish
Okay.
the next section, and then I think maybe they're referring to Lane's item.
Thank you for that clarification.
Land and facilities. A lot less projects to talk about here, but this is what we're looking at here. The next year, really focusing on the projects that are scheduled in this year. We have we see 3 here that stand out: the municipal auditorium, city hall improvements, and the courtyard relocation or operations complex. So get into the operations complex. We've talked. Sorry about that. We've brought this one before you many times, but this is the project to relocate our existing courtyard to the new site near the Ocean View Cemetery. If you'll remember, we came to council in November 2023 for the acquisition and for CEQA to authorize schematic design. We came back in September 2024 to approve the award for the construction manager at risk, who's now going through the process of helping us with the design process. And then we came back most recently in February to appropriate $1.4 million for that design in CMAR. For construction design. Again, the project site is located off Ocean View Cemetery Road, so back behind the Pacific Motorsports. It's an upland location outside of the coastal zone and other hazard areas. And that was a major reason for the relocation of this project, to get it up out of the tsunami zone so that we could be responsive in an emergency situation. Additionally, the project, our existing courtyard was in need of a lot of repair, so it made sense to, if we were thinking about moving it, to wait and do those and not take care of those repairs at the current site, but doing it at the existing. This, if you will remember, was presented to you before, but this is generally what the layout looks like. It's a little different from what's shown here in that we have one building, one main building versus the A and B building. Sorry about that. I grabbed the wrong photo from my slide, but generally speaking, we have a large building that will house our water, sewer, streets, maintenance crews, as well as our fleet shop, the current tenants down at the courtyard. We're currently in subcontractor bidding. That's part of our process that we're going with the construction manager at risk. And that we should get those bids in the next couple weeks. And the plan is to start site construction in summer 2025. So we're going to approach construction in a phased approach where we'll do site construction first while they're finishing design of the buildings and foundations. And that way, as that design finishes up, the site will be ready to start the building construction, which saves us time on schedule and mostly same time on schedule. The next project is our City Hall modernization. This project is mostly focused at upgrading the City Hall's HVAC system, getting the elevator upgraded, and replacing the curtain wall system. The curtain wall system is all the windows and walls around the exterior of the building. Those will be replaced. There's many of them that are leak or don't hold air, they can't close, or the windows don't open or are permanently shut or permanently open, all the above. We're in the design phase currently, and our next phase would be bidding, and then construction. We're still working through that, but 2026 is what we're currently looking at right now. There might be other improvements that would come along with it depending on budget, improvements to restroom facilities, kind of mostly shared spaces, that sort of thing. We also have the municipal auditorium improvements, as it's lovingly called the West Wing improvements, to potentially create office spaces in the windship side of the building. So we're not talking about the actual the auditorium side, but the windship side where the classrooms used to be. So repurposing that space into usable, more modern office space for city staff. Currently, we're in an RFP process. We have received some RFPs, and we'll be going through those. Just recently, just yesterday, we received those, and we should start design shortly thereafter. So this spring and through the summer. And that wraps up that section.
Thank you. So do we have any questions? Councilmember Contreras-Deloche?
Yeah. Hi, thank you. On the City Hall, with the windows and stuff like that, I was just going to ask, are you guys going through and replacing all of them, or are you just repairing and,
Yeah, we've looked into over the years of the way the system works as a curtain wall system. A lot of buildings, they come as a whole set. So it's very difficult to get parts and pieces for like the hinge sets and everything. Like they don't make those anymore. They're like a custom type thing. So you might be able to replace a window panel, but actually being able to get the window to shut and close all the way because the hinges can't be repaired, more or less. That's where we've tried for years and years and years to fix and kind of do that approach of like one pane at a time or one window at a time, and we're just not able to get parts and pieces for it. So it would be a full replacement of the curtain wall system. Like the windows that you see here, that's all up. They go column to column, and they're kind of like a set that comes
So it would
together.
be to replace all the windows on the entire building in their entirety.
Yes.
Okay. Can I ask really quick how operations are going to work during that time when you start pulling out entire walls?
So that's right now we're going through. We have the West Wing, as engineering is affectionately calling it, is a big storage area for a lot of our staff. And so over the last few months, we've been going through all of that and trying to combine that, and then the stuff that get rid of what we don't need, keep what we need to keep, and then look at a process of digitizing that stuff so that we can, go all the way electronic, and that'll free up all the space. And so in the interim, we plan on cleaning it up so that it's habitable for folks. So when we do that, we're hoping we could do City Hall by floor. And as we do it by floor, we'll take one floor, put them over at the Muni for a temporary period of time, and then go up through the floors and have them there temporarily while they're working on City Hall.
Okay, thank you. And then I had one last question. And maybe this is just a good one for another time that I realized I forgot to follow up with you and ask what's going on with the roof over at the Muni.
So that was fixed. Those are dogs. That's from birds.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah, and so we have we worked with the contractor for that, and facility staff, when that happens, they periodically go up there and check it out, and they fix it as that happens.
Do we have any idea why? And is that just to let you guys know? And when I went up with the firefighters, I found a bunch of holes in our new roof, some quite deep, pecked into. the roof on the top of the Muni, and we're like, what are these? And yeah, they look like bird things. Is there a way to prevent that from being an issue again, just like in 3 months?
So the patches, we're trying out different options. So once we patch it, we'll put stuff over the top of that to try and prevent that from happening. If we don't stay on top of it, it'll be an issue. If we stay on top of it, we should be fine. But we're looking at different alternatives to put over the top of that. Some of the problem is it can negate the warranty if we do certain things, and so we need to be careful of that. And so we're working with the contractor on solutions for it.
What was the length of time on the warranty on that roof?
On workmanship is 5 years, and on materials that's 20.
Okay. Yeah. And have they run into this problem before with that material that birds are like attracted to it and want to poke holes in it?
They have. We may have some weird birds, but we're working on solutions for it. The good news about that is that was very difficult. We had some leaks that we thought were actually coming from the walls, which we do have, but they were able to track down the leaks. It's completely secure now, and so I've been here for 20 years, and the Muni's been flooding ever since then, and this is the first time that we've been able to prevent that flooding from happening.
Was this a new roof material that we hadn't used prior to? I'm just curious how no one anticipated that we were going to have like a bird scenario.
Well, we haven't used it personally. Obviously, it's been used at other places. We have a not nylon. Come on, what am I thinking of on the top of our roof here?
Oh, yeah, the Hypalon.
Yeah, anyway, it's a different material that's up here. That was what we bid, and it came way above what we could afford. And so this was an option that was provided by the contractor. It's functional. It's I haven't been up there since. I could follow up with facilities, but they're staying on top of it. I mean, that's the reason why we have all the walking paths up there. So
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I appreciate the update.
Councilmember Fernandez?
So coming back then to City Hall and doing the redevelopment that we need here, just going back to some of those minor things then around like the hinges on these windows and the need to replace. I'm sure we've attempted to try and do that in-house, and I forget what the terminology is for that, but is it just gotten to a point where it's just too costly to continue doing that, or it requires too much worker hour? Like, how come we can't just maintain what we have at the moment?
Yeah, it really comes down to the material aging over time. These are all aluminum framed windows with hinges that when they get bent or they stop pivoting, it's a very specific system, and there's not like maintenance parts to go replace those hinges. So it's not so much like of an effort of maintenance, because again, I know ever since I've been here, so the last 10 years, it was already clearly an existing condition. I don't know how long it's been going on for, but I mean, it's been a condition for quite some time. And we've tried replacements. We've tried calling in contractors through maintenance contracts to come in and look at those, and it just hasn't. We haven't been able to make an impact on it. There's also other things outside of just the windows not operating, where there's leaks that get water leaks down in between the panes, and then also runs along the top and comes down in. We've been able to fix a few of those, and some of them we haven't been able to fix. So they're very, when you think of a modern energy efficient building, we have a lot of air leaks that come through here. When the wind blows, you can feel it type of situation.
Right. So, go ahead, City Manager.
And just it's amazing the difference in the different sides of the building. Jesse's on the south side. I'm on the north side. It's 52 degrees in my office right now, and it always is. And in the wintertime, it's much less than that. But then you can get on his side of the building when the sun's shining, and it's a huge difference. So the efficiency is a huge part of this, and what's making this super expensive, and correct me if I'm wrong, is these windows are structural, and so it's we've been hammering duct taping them for a very long time, and like Jesse said, when they go bad, it's either keep them shut all the time or they're open.
Load-bearing windows, is that what I'm hearing?
No, not so much.
No,
that.
yeah.
But the other part of that, is the HVAC system. That's a big cost for it. And you'll notice that we have radiators that, come around the bottom side of those panels, and throughout they work different ways in different parts of the building. There's sections on the third floor where they don't work at all. There's sections they work fine. There's, it's a hodgepodge around the city. And I think we've probably called every local contractor that we have to come in and give it a run to see if they can figure out how to fix it. So that's one of the things we're weighing is like, how do we, what do we do with the HVAC system? Do we keep a similar system where we keep our boiler, we keep the plumbing, and then we look at just putting on new radiators that, we know that will flow and, produce the heat that needs to be.
Kind of moving away from the 1950s, 1960s standards to
yeah,
the new millennium.
We have a decent radiator system, or boiler system, I should say. It's not incredible. It's not that inefficient, but these don't work very well. That's for sure. The radiators.
Okay. So then it's not only bringing it up to date, but it's also about the efficiency then too, where we're at with a lot of these internal mechanisms here for City Hall.
Certainly, yeah. If you think, there's a lot of people who run, they're running, electric. They're trying to run electric heaters, and they're hiding them under their desk to try to keep warm during the day. So those aren't very efficient. So if we had steady heat from our HVAC system, it'd be a much more efficient way to operate the building.
Right. Thank you.
Any further questions? Will you just clarify what side the Winship side is? Is it on the East Street side?
It's on the East Street side.
Okay, I'm just curious. All right, well, with that, finally to my favorite part, can we open this item up for public comment? Is there anyone here from the public who wants to speak on this item? Please come forward. Seeing no one, do we have anyone on Zoom? Seeing no one on Zoom, we'll bring it back to council. Close public comment, bring it back to council for a motion and a vote. 2, we're just receiving a report, so we are not even doing that. I'm sorry, without a clear agenda, I've been flailing here a little bit. Okay, so moving on to our next item, capital project reimbursement with Director Millar. That's so pretty. That logo is so pretty. Sure, thank you. Yeah, go ahead. Wait till his face comes up.
Good evening. This is really part 2 of the presentation. Historically, our CIP has been funded through what is called pay as you go. What that means is that we pay for projects with monies received during the fiscal year. But when we start talking about projects that cost upwards of $20 million, that is no longer an option for us. And we have to look into financing. So the purpose of this report is really to answer the following questions. What are the financing options? What options are best for the city? How do we go to market, or how do we issue that debt? What will this cost? And what are the next steps? So to begin with that first question, really the city has 3 different financing options. That includes general obligation bonds, or GO bonds, revenue bonds, and what is called a private placement. So what is unique about a general obligation bond is that it requires a voter approval of 66%. These are backed by tax revenues. So the city's sales tax and property tax is used, or is pledged, as the way to pay back the debt. These are sold on the open market, meaning that any anyone in the public can purchase these bonds. And because from the investor's standpoint, they're seen as the most secure, typically they provide the lowest interest rates, which translates to the lowest cost option for the city. The next option are what are called revenue bonds. Revenue bonds do not require voter approval. They are backed by a specific revenue stream. They're also sold on the open market, and they also provide competitive interest rates. Both revenue bonds and GO bonds typically are tax exempt for the investor. So in terms of how the market perceives these instruments, they typically see them as favorable because they offer a tax exempt revenue stream, and they are seen as very stable when compared with corporate debt. The third option is what is called private placement. This, again, does not require voter approval. Typically, this is one buyer of the debt, such as a bank. And because it's one buyer of the debt, usually these are the least competitive in terms of higher interest rates and costs to issue that debt. So what options are best for the city? And the reason I say options is because we are proposing two different bonds. And in both cases, the revenue bonds make the most sense. I'll start with the wastewater fund. So, and typically, utilities, whether that's water, wastewater, electricity, revenue bonds are really the only option because they don't receive tax monies. They're receiving monies from, serving water or, doing toll roads. So it's pretty simple. Wastewater rate revenues are committed to repay the bond debt, and the wastewater rate revenues are that specific revenue source. For the general fund, revenue bonds are also the best choice, but it's a different type of revenue bond. It's called a lease revenue bond. These are interesting products because lease revenues are committed to repay the bond debt. And lease revenues is an interesting concept for the general fund because we don't receive much lease revenue, and that's not really what this is. Essentially what happens is that you set up a second entity. In this case, it would be the Eureka Public Financing Authority, or the EPFA. This was created when we had a redevelopment agency. Essentially, the EPFA would issue debt on behalf of the redevelopment agency. The EPFA is still in existence because we still have redevelopment debt. So the EPFA works with the city of Eureka. The city transfers public assets like facilities or streets or street infrastructure or parks. These public assets are used as collateral when issuing debt. The EPFA then raises cash, and the city uses that cash to do different types of projects, in this case, the facility projects. And then after the project is complete, the city pays the EPFA lease payments, and that is what's used to repay the debt. So how do you go to market, or how do you issue bonds? You start with a team. So right now the city is working with financial advisors. We're required to work with an outside financial advisor. In this case, it's an agency called PFM. PFM has been working with the city for the past 2 decades, and they have helped us issue a number of different bonds, as well as some refinancing. You also need outside counsel or bond counsel. In this case, it's a firm called ORIC. Again, ORIC has worked with the city on a number of different bond deals. And then finally, we have underwriters. In this case, a firm called Oppenheimer. And the underwriters are the group that goes to market, or they sell your bonds. They also help you price your bonds. The second step, or after creating a team, you work with the financial advisors and the bond counsel, and you create what is called an official statement. An official statement is a combination of financial analysis and risk analysis. So your financial advisors help you put together the numbers that the investors want to see, and your bond counsel helps you identify all the potential risks that the city faces, whether that's forest fires or tsunamis. You must disclose all of this information because it's how the investors price the bonds, or how they assess the risk of the bonds. The next step, after you've approved your official statements, is you go to rating agencies. Typically, we have used S&P. What S&P does is they look at those official statements, and they look at the city's financial position, and they provide a score or a grade. After talking with our financial advisors, we believe that we will be somewhere in this range for both the general fund debt as well as the wastewater debt. And then the final step is going to market. Really how this works is that your underwriters go out and they start to sell your bonds. Typically what happens is that large institutions, they may purchase all of your bonds. Especially muni debt, it's very favorable. So once they go out and they find buyers, you go to market, and typically, you're going to have a few large players kind of take most of your debt, or buy most of the bonds. After that, those bonds are sold on the open market, or what's called the secondary market. So really anybody in the public can buy, or in the future, anyone in the public could buy City of Eureka debt. What will this cost? When it comes to general fund debt, and this is really focused on those facility projects, we're estimating about $32 million in debt over a 30-year term. Interest rates, we believe, are going to be between 4 and 4.5%. This translates into an annual debt service payment of roughly $2 million. That $2 million will not just be paid by the general fund. City Hall and the courtyard, these facilities are used by water, wastewater, and the general fund. We believe the cost ratio between the three funds are as follows, with the general fund absorbing about 44% of that debt service payment. That translates to about $860,000 a year. So a couple years ago, we adopted some policies that essentially committed us to spending a certain amount of money for both streets and facilities. These are policies 2.68, which stated that we would commit $2.5 million from the general fund for street projects, and 2.69, which committed about $500,000 per year for facility improvements. Because of the estimated cost of this debt, we will be proposing a update to these two policies. Essentially, we're going to shift monies from one to the other by shifting about $500,000 from streets to the facilities policy. We will be able to cover that annual debt service payment and also have some monies left over for improvements to other city facilities. For the wastewater fund, We estimate that we will need a maximum of $13 million in debt. Part of that $20 million project will be financed by Humboldt Community Services District. Again, we're looking at a 30-year term, roughly a 4.5% interest rate. And, with those assumptions, you're looking at about $800,000 per year that the wastewater fund would pay for. So what are the next steps? So at the May 6th council meeting, I will bring updated policies. This includes the 2 budget policies as well as the city's debt policy, as well as a long-range financial analysis for the general fund to see the impact of this debt product. At the May 20th council meeting, we plan to bring the official statements for the lease revenue bond. This needs to be approved by City Council. Then in June, we assume that we would be able to go and get a bond rating and then to go out to market. Then in July, again, I'll bring back an analysis that is focused on the wastewater fund and the impact of this debt on the wastewater fund. And then sometime in July, we will approve the second official statement for the revenue bond. In August is when we would likely go get another bond rating and to go to market. Before I finish, so the item that's in front of you right now is a resolution. It's fairly straightforward. Essentially, this resolution is something that is required for us to reimburse ourselves for any costs that we incur for any of these projects prior to issuing the debt. This resolution does not commit us to issuing debt. It simply allows us to reimburse any costs that we will incur between now and this summer. And I'm available for questions.
Do we have questions for Director Millar? Councilmember Moulton.
Thank you, and thank you, Director Millar. In the case of when you say a certain amount of money is going to be paid by wastewater every year, is that going to the ratepayers? That's my question.
Yes, the rate revenues will help support that debt service payment.
But does that mean an increase in rates specifically to cover this? Not just money coming from rates, but does that mean that the rates will go up in order to cover this debt like it would go up to cover other expenses involved in treating the water?
So today typically every 5 years we do a rate study, and that typically results in increases to water and sewer rates. Mm-hmm. This debt won't necessarily change the rate of increase, but it might be considered, and it could have the effect of requiring the wastewater system to increase rates at a higher level than if we did not do these projects.
So, and correct me if I'm wrong, Director Millard, if we did it on a pay-as-you-go basis, that rate increase for these projects in water and wastewater would be more significant. If you know what I mean, you're spreading the cost over a period of time. So if we decided to do the bypass project without doing this bond, it's not spreading the cost out as long. As far as the cost will be the same, but you're spreading it out over a longer period of time.
That's correct. You can use the financing to minimize the increases to the ratepayers.
So the ratepayers are going, like we, as people who pay for water in Eureka, are going to end up paying for this through the water rates, but doing it this way, we spread it out over more time. We finance it essentially.
Correct.
Okay.
So the biggest impact is that you'll have less monies to do those pay-as-you-go projects every year. Unless you decide you want the best of both worlds, where you do those big projects and get the financing, and you also want robust amount of pay-as-you-go projects, so we can based on where we think rates will go, we can kind of toggle back and forth, and we can look out into the future and use the financing products as a tool to keep rates lower. Unfortunately, because of the legal issues around this project, that we have to move forward. So regardless of the impact on rate revenues, it's something that we have to do, and something that is going to get analyzed in the next rate study and could result in higher rates.
I understand. It makes me wonder about, because a lot of this Clean Water Act infrastructure was built in the same decade, essentially, you know, between it passing and like the mid 80s, a lot of these plants were built. I wonder how many other cities are having to make these kinds of massive improvements, like right about now, these massive infrastructure changes and improvements. We have a unique situation, obviously, but just the plant itself being 40 plus years old. The 80s wasn't that long ago. Shush. One other question. Sorry, if you don't mind. Moving money from streets to facilities. Just talked about that. What does the... Oh, I wrote it down wrong. What is street outside of... what does it cost now? So you're moving half. I don't have the numbers now. Yeah, you're moving $500,000 over without the just the ongoing maintenance. What is the yearly cost now?
So typically the size of the project is based on how much money is available for street improvements. And since Measure H was approved, we've been dedicating essentially $2.5 million from those Measure H revenues, and they're supplemented with monies we receive from the state from gas tax. So, for example, in this year's budget, we had $2.5 million from the general fund and about $1.4 million from the state, for a total of $3.9 million. So that $3.9 million is what's available to do projects with. With this change to the policy, what we're saying is, next fiscal year, it wouldn't be 3.9 million. It would be about 3.4 million going forward.
I guess my the concern I'm trying to get to is, I understand when Measure H passed, we started doing a lot of catch up on deferred maintenance, and my understanding is that by not being able to plan so far ahead, we weren't. The catch up is more expensive than the maintenance would have been in the first place. Does that make sense? I'm concerned about getting in that position again. And I know that there's a finite amount of money and lots of work to do, but could you speak to that or could someone speak to that idea of, like, once we get everything nice and we have a plan that goes forward using the predictable income source of Measure H, is that yearly cost going to even out? Can we afford to move this money over?
I think the perspective of a little bit of perspective. It's a difficult question you ask, but it's a good one. I think coming from where we were before Measure H, Lane, you can help me with the numbers, but I mean, we weren't putting a lot of money into our street maintenance at all. It was, less than $1 million a year. I think it was
about 500,000 because a lot of that gas tax went to pay for street staff.
Yeah, in fact, prior to Measure H, almost all of the monies we received from the state were paying for maintenance or personnel, and there was roughly 200,000 per year to go to street infrastructures, and that was fairly. I would say on average, you were looking at between 200,000 to 500,000, at least between fiscal year 12-13 and fiscal year 2021. So the introduction of Measure H, essentially, in just 1 year, we did about a decade worth of street improvements. So even with reducing the Measure H monies for street improvements, we're still far ahead of where we were prior to Measure H. But it would be preferable to keep that commitment of 2.5 million. But we're trying to balance the needs of our street infrastructure with our facility infrastructure. Both are important, and we're just trying to balance those needs.
And Engineer Willer can correct me, but I mean, this is this coming up bid will be our 4th year, correct? Of Measure H, I believe.
No, it's fifth.
5th year. So a lot of those higher volume roads that were the most concerning, the H&Is, the Harris, the Hendersons and stuff like that, are done, and so I don't know, correct me, I would assume that the lower volume roads would.
We're not done yet.
Yeah.
We got a lot of streets to pave that are going in, we're really trying to get the high volume, that the most users in Eureka are using, that gets the most out to the people that are using the most, right? So that's, I think, as Miles was trying to say, they were trying to hit our arterials, those roads that everybody's using to try to get around town, to get through across the gulches and to get around. So to get at your question, though, I mean, we're going to be, if we reduce the budget by $500,000, it is going to slow the rate that we're going to be able to improve the roads. I mean, it's less money going towards street maintenance. Like Director Morales mentioned, it is going to another need we have. So it's really that balancing of where do you put the dollar, where do you want to prioritize your dollars?
When it comes to the kind of game of catch up that we're playing, and I know we have that whole street grading, these streets are terrible and these streets are okay, and we start with the arterials because they're the most used. Once we get everything kind of redone and then we're moving forward, do we get to drop back to like a maintenance level or of cost? My question makes sense because we were trying to make up for the fact that the roads weren't well maintained because there wasn't enough money going into them. And so all of that extra work is costing extra money. Once we do all of that extra work and the roads have a good surface and we've got a plan and we've got it planned out for years because we have these consistent Measure H funds, just please tell me that the cost is going to go down.
Yeah, I think once we get to fixing some of these roads that have kind of gone beyond the limit of where you can just, hey, we're going to overlay them. We can't do that because they've cracked all the way through the subgrade, and they need a much more, like what we saw in Old Town, where we had to dig out large portions of the street in order to repair the subgrade and the pavement thickness, the base, the pavement. We'll start to get a handle on those, especially on the busier streets as we move forward. And eventually, yes, we will get to the point where your maintenance should be much more easy to get at because you've kind of got after those big repairs.
Because we're talking about maintenance instead of repair, essentially, or instead of total overhaul.
Yeah, total street rebuild versus maintaining that street going forward.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Just trying to get a perspective on the long-term goals of road maintenance.
Councilmember Castellano?
Thanks. I think that those are great questions personally. So thank you for asking those. Director Millar, you mentioned the grade released for the city or anticipated to be released. Is that related to how capable we are perceived to be able to repay the bond?
Yes. So essentially, they're going to look at your most recent financial statements and your history, and they're going to see essentially your capacity to pay those debt service payments today. And then they're going to make some assumptions about what costs and revenues will do in the future. So that is essentially how they determine what to rate your bond. There could be other factors. If we were in an area that was prone to, let's say, wildfire, they might consider that to be risky, and therefore they would lower that grade.
Gotcha. And then related to risk, just, are there chances that we would lose a park or something if we couldn't repay the bond, or what are the risks?
I think theoretically, yes. Have you seen that happen before? I don't think there is. There's not a city that you could point to where this has happened. So that is a risk. it's not unsimilar to if you did a go bond, because if you did a go bond and you had issues, they're just going to take your tax dollars away from you. So it's kind of either cash or parks.
Right. Okay. I'm sure. That, yeah.
As of right now, I think there's 5 properties that they're looking at. One is a park. The other properties are not.
What are the
parks.
other properties?
It's Dias.
Not the egret. Not the egret.
It's because of the value matched, and that's the reason why, is because the values of the properties at a certain
Egret.
level. We would probably we would remove our property and just give them the land if it came down to it.
You can swap properties out. So eventually when the courtyard's developed, you can use that, and that would take a large piece of that collateral.
So you mentioned there were more than one property. So what are the other
Yeah.
ones?
I think headquarters is one.
Yep.
Dias. The Wharfinger. We can get that to you. I don't want to misspeak, but there's 5 that they're looking at now, and we have the ability to swap those out.
And we're looking at creating a list that would translate into the best possible grade. So the purpose is to get the best rate. I mean, you can pledge streets. It would be interesting to see how they cost public streets, because that seems like a hard thing to take away or resell. But yeah, it's an interesting type of debt product.
And I think it's a good point, because while that's available, I think it helps with our interest rate and all the ratings and everything. So we sent them our list, our insurance list of every one of our properties and the values of those properties, and they were the ones who came back with these 5 properties in order to get us the best rate.
Thanks. Fascinating. And then do we have any bonds that we're currently paying?
Yes. We have 3 different bonds. We have a lot of these are refinancing bonds. So essentially what they refinanced was a package of older bonds. So the redevelopment agency has what's called the TAB, or the tax allocation some acronym. That's old redevelopment debt that essentially the state pays for. And then the water fund has the 2022 refinancing bonds, which was a package of 5 different bonds that the water fund issued in the past. And then the wastewater fund also has a 2022 refunding bond. And again, that was a package of older bonds.
The harbor's not.
Oh, I'm sorry, and the Harbor Fund. Harbor Fund is technically a redevelopment debt product as well. So none of the redevelopment debt is paid for out of the general fund.
I'm curious about the repackaging, the redevelopment debt. Does that, not saying we would then want to go out for, I know that's one of the challenges with potentially creating an EIFD is the successor, because of the successor agency and the redevelopment debt. Would that potentially create opportunities for an EIFD if we repackage those debts?
If you get usually repackage to get a lower rate, and as your redevelopment debt gets paid off, then it opens up more property tax revenues for all the entities that receive property tax. So let's say if we just decided to pay off the redevelopment debt, not all of that would come back to the city. It would get allocated to the county and the school districts and all those other entities. So it's not a 1-for-1.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Councilmember Bauer.
Yeah. So I think Director Millar, you were saying we're looking at lease revenue bonds as the best option, right? Are we concerned about the potential for tax exempt status to go away? I know there's been talk at the federal level. I guess the question would be, if we got this in before somebody does something so ridiculous as remove that tax exempt status, would we maintain it because we've already got it in?
Yes.
Okay.
I believe that would be unlikely for something like that would be a major event. For that to happen in the next few months, I think I question if that's even something Congress could pull off. But also, once you sell those bonds, you're in the clear. So that tax exempt status is meaningful for the investor and not for the city. Let's say for some reason this happened tomorrow. What would happen is that interest rate on that debt would probably go up by 0.5 to 1%. It would start to look more like a, because there are non-tax exempt muni bonds, and they're more expensive essentially.
Okay. Well, thank you. And I want to circle back to Councilmember Moulton's question about transportation. And I think of the voters when we passed, Measure H, and we all know that it's pretty critical. Transportation is something tangible that, people drive on roads, but they don't necessarily come to City Hall, the Muni, that kind of thing, right? So I think I don't want to say I'm okay with it, but I think there's need for us to seek ways to recover that revenue. Like, is Measure O going to be on the plate? I think it should be, right? We should receive a portion of that. Our voters helped pass the county's measure. And then there's, I guess it's a question really, that the old facilities, old operations facility, would the sale or revenue from a lease of that help bring our transportation budget back to 2.5? I think that's really vital for us to think about.
So we're in the process of that, and that'll help to offset this. We are in discussions with Costco for that and moving forward with that. So it will, and Lane has factored that in. We haven't come to an agreement yet. We're still negotiating, but we have a letter of interest from them, and we have an idea of what that'll bring in.
So potentially.
Would say that we very much should set a goal of replenishing the monies for streets. Not only should we strive to hit 2.5 million in the future, we should steadily increase that amount because of inflation. It's just not something that would be easy to achieve in 1 year. You're looking at potentially a 5 to 10 year process where you build back, and I think that is possible. One of the things that's making this challenging is Measure H, when it was first implemented, was actually generating more tax dollars than it is today. So a lot of this has to do with our local economy, and that turning around to the positive will also help in this situation.
All right. And maybe one last question about the Eureka Public Financing Authority. Who is that? It's us, right?
Yeah.
So essentially, if we default, I think I know the answer to that question. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Fernandez.
Nope, both my questions have been asked.
Okay. So I would like some clarification. Do you have some questions? So I would like some clarification, actually. So I'm curious. I know we're going to talk about roads next time, not tonight. However, I'm just curious, how much of the roads in our city are actually completed? How much of our roads do we have left to finish? Well, never done, but to a level that is
At least it's not a flow meter question.
acceptable, a level that is acceptable to the public.
Is it okay if I share something that we have on the website to
Sure.
help with that question?
Please. So this was created by our GIS staff
and presented last year during the 24-25 budget adoption. It's really hard to read, but I hope that helps a little bit.
It does help a little bit. It's hard to give you a quantifiable number, Mayor Burgell. You got like how many are left, but I think if
Or
you look,
percentage.
yeah, I think I would say of our arterials, our main thoroughfares, those are we're getting into a level somewhere closer to probably between 60 and 80% of those being completed. And then when the next levels down, as you get into those the different classifications down, it becomes less. Clearly, we made some inroads in certain areas in Old Town. You can see the gridded out area there where we've gotten a good percentage there. But I don't have that answer. I will certainly bring that back and have an answer for you at the next presentation. I wasn't quite prepared for that one though. But do you have any follow up on that?
So
Just a rough number. So we have about 114 miles of road in the city limits, and according to this map, we've done 27 since Measure H. So that's roughly 24% of our road system because of Measure H.
But it's the most used roads.
Yeah. But
Sorry.
Yeah, and that doesn't count for the roads that we've already completed this year or when we complete Myrtle here in the next couple months.
So the reason I asked that clarifying question is that Measure H, when it was sold to the public, it was about roads primarily. And I think that the public still, we've heard in council last year a lot of conversations about that, people kind of not understanding, that how that was working. And so I think that if we were to change, this is just a concern that I have in the public, I think it's going to be really important that the public understands if we do change those numbers, the reasons why and what we have accomplished and what we have left to accomplish, so that everybody is clear in understanding where their tax dollars are going. So that's why I wanted to talk about that. And I was just curious too, I had one other question, not about the roads, about the impacts on the rates. So that's a definite, right? That's something that's going to change. Do we have any ideas about how much that could potentially go up, or is that something that is kind of out there as an unknown?
it's somewhat it's kind of an unknown. But at the same time, the major driver of rates for both the water and wastewater system are the capital projects that we need to complete to keep it up to date. And on the wastewater side, the rates are going to be mostly impacted by this legal issue that is forcing us to do these projects on a different timeline than we had originally planned. So I would say that, yes, of course, when you add costs to this system, it will have an impact on rates. But the main driver, I would say, is the legal issues that we're facing and the mandate to get these projects done.
Okay, thank you. I think, go ahead.
Once again, whether we finance this way or whether we do it on a pay-as-you-go, the rates are going to be affected. And by doing it, by financing, those rates are spread out over a longer period of time.
Yeah, and I appreciate the clarification. I just think that it's better to talk about it sooner than later and not hit people up, 6 months down the line. Oh, guess what? This is what we're doing, and this is why this is happening. Whereas if we start having this conversation now where people can start to digest it for themselves, this is what's going to be happening in the future, and we need to really pay attention.
And I think we're going next year to a rate review, or 2 years?
2 years.
2 years. So 2 years will be the next rate review.
Great. Thank you. Are there any further questions? Councilmember Castellano?
Let's see. I think I'm imagining for the roads that there's, after hearing other council members' questions, that there's, I guess I'm curious if there has been some sort of data analysis of, right, is there a sweet spot in which we get to a certain point where a certain amount of construction road improvement has been completed, and therefore we're more at the maintenance level versus the, deep resurfacing level. And so therefore, of course it would make sense that we don't need to spend as much on roads because, we're more, like maintaining what has already been improved. And then, related to that, I think I'm also wondering in terms of, has there been an analysis at, basically, like, let's say we're not to that sweet spot yet where, we, for the next 3 years, put more into roads and then we gradually taper off and put more into repaying the bond. Does that make sense?
Or into infrastructure.
Yeah, like a
I think,
graduated, yeah.
as-
I don't know. I'm just wondering.
As Director Wheeler stated, it's, I don't know if we can look at pavement management system, but it's to find that sweet spot to where you're at. Okay, we've done these major roads, because it's going to be, you have really low volume roads. When I'm walking, I shouldn't mention this, but 9th between H and G is pretty bad. It's a pretty low volume road. To get to that point where we've actually resurfaced every road, and I don't even know if we have the funding to get to that over, and what time frame that would take to get to. The reason for transferring the money, obviously, is to make sure that we have funding available to pay that $900,000 debt. Now, if we get into this ground lease with Costco for that property, that'll help offset that, and it'll help offset that. I think that what Lane is saying is really relevant too, because while Measure H has been great, it's actually decreased in the amount of revenue that we've gotten, but yet we've been still meeting that $2.5 million. So obviously the economy is cyclical. I'm not saying it's going to happen tomorrow, but obviously that can adjust how much money we have so that we can bring it back up to where we're at. I don't know if there's a good answer to your question, because I don't know what the analysis would look like to find that happy spot where we're at. But ideally, you're right. If you got to that point, we were spending money on slurry seals and overlays as opposed to grinding and redoing roads. But, the major ones that most people use, we at a pretty high percentage of getting those done. And even the smaller ones like 2nd and X and over by Carbon-Otal and by Target, that area there was really, really bad, and it's not a very high volume, but we got to that because of how poor the condition was.
Yeah. Okay.
And because the people that live over there were very loud. I think
And-
that is important to say.
And there's some possibility that other kinds of funding can help with the roads too. Like, I know a lot of the bike lane funding, for instance, has also helped with road improvements.
So that's a great example. The Link Housing Project, brought in funding for G Street, which will include a bike boulevard that City Engineer Wheeler and I was talking about. We had HSIP money. You can talk about the different projects that you bombarded me with the other.
Yeah, so no, we try to leverage those funds the best we can. For example, on projects that we have coming up right now, Myrtle, that's our next, it's part of Pavement Maintenance 2024. That we were able to bring STIP dollars in, so state funding, state transportation improvement program funding into that project to help out with some of the bike facilities, including being able to pave those bike lanes. So that kind of helps with that, as well as a lot of other bike improvements on that roadway. C Street Bike Boulevard, that is primarily funded through ATP, the Active Transportation Program. And so with some of that dollars, we're able to do some paving, and then we're also bringing some Measure H dollars in to kind of help bridge the gap that's there with that. So we're definitely leveraging those funds for that project as well. Link Housing, the G Street Bike Boulevard that Miles mentioned, that one's coming up in the next couple of years, and we should be able to leverage those dollars not only for the specific bicycle improvement infrastructure, as far as like trying to reduce the volume of car traffic on those roads, but also be able to help with some of the paving for those roads. And we'll continue to look for those opportunities as well.
And I would be remiss if I didn't mention that I do appreciate all the roads that have been done, because it certainly makes a difference for so many of us. And I want to share that appreciation. Anything else before I open it up to public comment? Okay, so at this time, we'll open it up for the public. Is there anyone from the public here that would like to comment on this item? Seeing no one in the audience, we'll bring it over to Zoom. Is there anyone on Zoom that would care to comment on this item? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to council for a motion and a vote. Councilmember Fernandez.
Just to say quickly, because now we're in the more appropriate time for commentary, correct? Just that if I recall correctly, over a year ago, the same council approved to take or utilize funds from Measure H for the, our Beta Zoo Trail. And so I think this is just as appropriate to utilize it for our infrastructure when it comes to the needs for our water and our safety in terms of the roads and, well, our wastewater and such. So I think it's in similar vein to that. But I do appreciate the comments because that's what we're likely going to hear most about is our streets. But with that, I don't think I have the motion on here, so I don't know how to make it. Staff recommendation. I'll move that.
I'll second.
There we go.
A motion and a second, please vote.
Unanimous yes vote, motion carries.
Great. Well, thank you everybody for being here on this lovely Earth Day. There's still some sunshine time left. We're adjourned.